Every day in the USA, people find themselves in court.
Good afternoon, Mr. Gibson. Good. You're Jeffrey Allen Gibson.
Yes.
Of course, I know you, but I need to identify you for the record. You're here with your lawyer, Mr. Timothy George, also present as prosecuting attorney Deborah Davis, and the trooper in charge of this matter, Hunter Bowersox. Mr. Gibson, this is the time and date for a preliminary examination in this case. The original first charging document charged felonious assault, but they filed a formal charging document that alleges the following: that on or about February 7th of 2025 in Sturgis Township, that you assaulted Riley Ashton Smith with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder. That is commonly known as assault with intent to do great bodily harm. It's a felony. It's punishable by up to 10 years of imprisonment and a fine of up to $5,000. You're also charged as a fourth habitual offender, making a mandatory 25-year sentence and punishable by up to life imprisonment. So this matter's got some substantial consequence to it. This is the time for a preliminary examination. I think you've had one of these before, but the preliminary examination is the hearing that must be established that probable cause exists that a crime was committed, probable cause that you did it. You're not going to be found guilty or not guilty at this hearing. It's just a question of whether the prosecutor can establish a standard of probable cause. Do you understand?
Yes.
And I've discussed this with your lawyer for yesterday and today, and he's assured me that you wish to have your preliminary examination in this matter. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and that's all right with me. That's why I'm here. Ms. Davis, the people ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You care to make any opening statement or just go right to your witness?
We can just begin with the witnesses.
All right, you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, the people would call Roberta Betke.
All right, this is Assistant Prosecutor 101. Deborah, would you bring her up?
You're gonna go up around here. Both of you take her up and around that way. Sorry.
Your Honor,
Yes?
if there's going to be multiple witnesses, I don't know if Mr. Smith is going to testify as well. We would just ask for a sequestration order.
That's fair. Are you Riley Ashton Smith? All right, I'm going to ask that you wait out in the hall, and when it's your turn, we'll come in and have you testify. Good afternoon, ma'am. I kind of got a little disoriented. Would you please stand up and raise your right hand? You swear or affirm any testimony that you're about to give in this matter will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Please have a seat. Would you state your first and last name and spell it for us?
Betke, B-E-T-C-K-E,
And your first name?
Roberta,
All right, thank you.
and I go by Bobby.
Okay. Ms. Davis?
Thank you, Your Honor. Is it okay if I call you Bobby?
Yeah.
All right. Bobby, can you describe the place where you live without the number of the address, but what road do you live on?
South Nottaway Road?
And is that in Sturgis Township?
Yes.
And located in St. Joseph County, Michigan?
Mhm.
And is it a yes or a no? Because it's recording, so we have to answer.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Do you know Jeff Gibson,
Yes.
also known as Jeffrey Gibson?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
I met him through his brother. His brother Steve has cut my grass for about 3-4 years. And my house needed painting. And he said that he had a brother that did things like that. So that's how I met him.
And the person that you know to be Jeffrey Gibson, is he here in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And can you describe what he's wearing for the record?
Wearing a green and white prison suit, I guess, or
Your Honor, the record reflects she's identified the defendant.
It may.
Bobby, on February 7th of 2025, did you have some contact with Jeff Gibson?
yes.
What did you see that day?
I was over here at the courtroom or the courthouse, and I got a PPO against him. And prior to that, 2 days before that, I was over here and got like an eviction notice. And so I came over here to Centerville, resubmitted it, and they said that it went through. So I said I would come over on Friday and get it.
Was Jeff aware that you were getting a PPO?
No,
And after you got the PPO, was he served with it, a copy of it?
they served it right here at the court, I guess, in the courtroom. Or outside of it. No, I didn't have to do it. When I went to pick it up, they said that they would take care of that.
So after you were done at the courthouse, where did you go?
I went to the sheriff's office because I wanted some questions answered, and nobody, the paperwork wasn't over there yet, and she just gave me the number to call when I got home. And when I came back from Centerville, I had stopped at I don't know what it's called. It's a grocery store and a U-Haul place, because I had signed for a U-Haul, and he was supposed to be taking some cut lumber and stuff over to the one person there, and he had an agreement with him. But he didn't bring the truck back when he was supposed to. And it was quite a few days afterwards. And I didn't know if I was responsible for it or not.
When you say he, or who are you
I'm
talking about?
talking about Jeff.
Okay. At
Yeah.
some point, did you go back to your residence?
I came back and I was startled to see his car in my driveway where I would normally park. And so I just went on and I went to my daughter's house because I don't have a cell phone. And I told her what was going on, and I called over to St. Joe County Sheriff's Office and told them that I had just gotten a PPO, and that the person that I got it for was in my driveway. Oh, early. It was afternoon, but I'm not quite sure what time for sure.
So you were inside the house and you saw him drive into the
No,
driveway?
I went in after he pulled in. And he pulled into the side of where he had parked before.
Did you have anybody with you at that point?
No,
Who is Riley Smith to you?
my grandson.
And does he live with you?
No,
Did you have contact with him on that day, on February 7th?
he was at his mom's house when I went over there and told her what was going on.
And at some point, did he come over to your house?
Yes, I'm trying to think, I can't remember, let's see. I called over there to my daughter's, and Riley said, Jeff was there. He wasn't bothering me. But Riley said he was gonna come on over, and I said, good, yeah, it'll make me feel better. And he actually got there before the state trooper got there.
And Riley, when he came to your house, tell me what you saw.
Well, I felt a little more relieved having him there, because I didn't, I first of all, I couldn't believe that Jeff would even come there. I mean, he was just served a PPO. So I was really shocked, and I just couldn't believe he was there.
Did you see any interaction between Riley and Jeff?
I seen just some of it, but the part where they had they were like an altercation, like.
So tell me about that. Where were you?
I was in the house. the Riley had came in and he said, I'm gonna go out to the garage and see if the electricity, if the electrical cords are still plugged in, because Jeff was using my electricity and I had unplugged it the night before. And
Let me stop you for a minute. I had some landlord tenant, or maybe the PPO part of it. After Mr. Gibson came to paint your house, did he move a camper or a trailer onto your property?
yes, he had broke up with a girlfriend that he was going with. She had kicked him out of the apartment, and it was summer. And I think he stayed at a couple lakes for a week or two, renting places. And then the neighbor next door, Mr. Andrews, I think Chris is his first name, a young couple. Jeff told me that Mr. Andrews said that he could park his camper on his property for about a week. But it didn't last that long, about three days. He said that Mr. Andrews wanted him to get it off. So he said, my backyard is right next to their property.
So he had his camper on your property at this address,
Right,
and he had electrical from the camper hooked up to
yeah,
your
he had
garage.
long extension cords, and yes.
And that was from July all the way into when this happened in February?
Oh, no, he actually moved in sometime, moved that over in 23.
All right.
So basically, all this time, he was using my electricity and
All right,
never
so you
offered
wanted him and his trailer off your property.
for quite some time before this incident happened, yes.
Okay, so did he have property that belonged to him in your garage?
Yes, he basically took over my garage.
All right, I'm up to speed, so go ahead, Ms. Davis.
Thank you. So can you describe where you were when you saw this, what you said is an altercation between Riley and Jeff?
I was in the kitchen and I heard this loud bang, and what it was Jeff had taken the garage door and pushed it up all the way, and that kind of startled me, and that's the first I seen of him.
And was there like a window you're looking through or a door?
A window.
Okay, opened or closed?
It was closed.
And just kind of walk me through what you saw.
He was standing there and I could see a little bit of Riley. And the only thing, I don't know what was said because I couldn't hear anything. The only thing I did see was that Jeff bending down, and when he came up, he had his hand and he started raising it up like that.
And you're gonna make the record reflect she's using her right arm and
His right arm, yeah.
came from the ground up past
Yeah.
her shoulder.
It may.
And what was in his hand?
There was it's like a saw or something. It had a wooden handle on it, and it was probably about that long with real jagged teeth. Something that you would use like to cut down a small little limb or something, I guess.
For the record, you said about the
I would-
length, I mean, inch wise.
I'd say a foot, if not a hair bigger than that.
Okay. And how long did this altercation take place?
Not very long at all. And then Riley came into the house and he said he just tried to kill me. He said he was gonna cut my head off.
And what
And
was
it
your
was just
reaction?
basically shortly after that is when the state trooper showed up, from what I remember.
And when Riley came in and said this to you, what was his demeanor?
Well, I was nervous. He was pretty cool about everything. He was,
So what do you mean by that?
well, I mean, I don't know. I get all flustered about stuff and he wasn't that way at all. He just basically said, yeah, he just accused, then he started telling me that, yeah, he said, yeah,
Your Honor, I don't object. This is hearsay.
Yes.
okay.
without saying what Riley said to you, what was your reaction?
Well, I was really shocked. And I felt a lot better when the state trooper was there, and then Riley went back outside and started talking to him.
When did you call for police assistance?
I called when I was over to my daughter's. Let's see. No, the second time. Let me see.
Okay. Were there two separate instances on this same day where police came to your house?
Yeah, the state trooper came twice. He left the first time. He got there the first time shortly after I had called at my daughter's house. And, and I went in the house and the trooper came and talked to Jeff. And then Jeff went around, I guess, to his camper. And it was shortly after that the trooper, I think, left. Riley came. I don't, but I know I called to have the trooper come back. I called St. Joe County.
And why did you call to have the trooper come back?
Because Jeff had left, from what I remember. The trooper left, and then Jeff came back again. And then that's when I called. And by this time, Riley was already there.
Okay. And so were you on the phone with dispatch when Riley and Jeff were in the garage?
This was before this happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so after this altercation that you saw through the window, Riley came inside your house?
Yes.
And do you know where Jeff went?
I don't know. I didn't really pay attention.
Okay. And then shortly thereafter, the
I
state police officer came in?
actually, I think he might have got into his car, because I know he rolled around the back of my drive or yard, and then his car is still sitting on the side of and I think the trooper asked him to get out, and eventually he did get out.
Okay. Do you know who saw that or serrated blade item that he was holding? Do you know where that came from? Who it belongs to?
I'm gonna say I think it's his. He basically has taken over my garage, and he leaves his tools all over the place. And I don't remember ever having anything like that. Not saying that it couldn't have been mine, but because he's had, so many bikes and all this stuff in there. I don't know where a lot of my stuff has came up missing.
No further questions of this witness. The defense may have some questions for you.
This is Mr. Timothy George. He's the lawyer for Mr. Gibson. He has some questions for you also. You are still under oath.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask you some things. If I don't make sense or you want me to repeat or slow down, please just let me know, okay? I want to take you back. You had said that all of this supposedly took place on February 7th. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. You had also testified that a few days before that, you had went to get an eviction paper. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I picked up an eviction paper. I came home from Centerville. He was in my drive. He was in the garage working, doing something. And so I had passed by because I was, surprised that he was there. And at halfway before I got to the corner, I stopped and I dated it and put my name on it. And then I went back and then I honked my horn and he came to the car and I handed it to him and he just didn't really pay attention to it.
Okay, so
And
that was you starting an eviction proceeding.
Yes.
Is that right?
And that paper is still in the garage on one of his bikes or something, just where he left it.
Okay, and then we go to 2 days later,
Yeah.
right? So that day, you had come to the court to get a PPO, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, had you seen Jeff here at the courthouse that day?
yes.
Where did you see him at?
He was in court for something else. And when I went to the circuit court to pick up, I had asked for a PPO before and it was denied.
Okay,
And so I had resubmitted it. And I called on Thursday and they said, yes, it was okay. I could come and get it. And I says, I'll be there on Friday.
had you planned to already be at his court hearing anyways?
No, I really wasn't.
It was just circumstance that he was here for a court hearing?
Well, I knew he had to be here.
Okay,
So because I was picking up the PPO, I went there first. And they said that they would serve it on him.
is that court staff, somebody here at the
Yeah,
court would serve him?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
and then ultimately you go back home, is that right? Was Jeff there when you got back to your
Yes.
house?
yes.
Okay, is that when you first called the police?
Yeah, because his car was there and I knew he had been served.
Okay,
It
and
was-
did an officer respond to your call?
Eventually, yes.
Okay, and you spoke to that officer, is that right?
It was Trooper Sylvester, or not Sylvester, the trooper.
And you're
sitting there.
pointing over here next to the prosecutor, so this is the trooper that you
Yes.
recall speaking to that
Yes.
day? Okay,
Mhm.
I don't want to get into what was said, but at that time, was it your understanding that Mr. Gibson could still be on the property?
No, I was totally shocked. That's why I didn't stop.
Did you later find out that he could be?
I don't understand if he can or he can't to this day.
Okay. All right, did you have a conversation with the officer about that?
We talked a little bit.
Okay.
I told him, yeah,
So did the officer arrest him for a PPO violation right after you talked to him?
no,
Do you know
he
why?
didn't. I don't know.
Okay. So at that point, what did you do next?
After what?
After you talked with the officer, what did you do next?
Well, I was standing outside and then he was talking to Jeff.
The officer was talking to Jeff?
Yes. Jeff, from what I remember, was in his vehicle or, yeah, and then I went in the house.
Okay,
Okay, and then the next thing I knew, the officer had left.
okay.
Yes,
And then was Riley there at this time?
no,
When did
that's
Riley show up?
when I called again and told my daughter, the officer had just left and Jeff was here and all this stuff. And that's when Riley said something about coming over.
Okay,
Yeah, everything happened so fast.
sure. Do you, and I know, I understand what you just told me, but do you know how long it was between the first time the officer left and when he came back? How long was the officer gone?
Gosh, I don't know. Not very, I don't know.
Okay, all right, fair enough. When the officer came back, what was it like outside? Was it dark? Was it light?
It was light.
Okay, it was still light outside?
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Does the garage have exterior lights?
There would be no reason to have them on. It was light.
Okay, does it have interior lights?
Yes, it does.
Okay, do you remember if those were on?
No, they were not on.
Okay, and so just so the court gets an understanding, if I'm in the kitchen of your home,
Mhm.
okay, and I'm facing you, just because everything's getting recorded here, where is the garage from your perspective?
The garage is attached to my house.
Okay, so if I'm looking out towards your driveway from the kitchen, is it to the right or to the left?
The garage
Yes,
to the left.
and how far is it from that window?
Oh, I don't know, probably 12, 15 feet, maybe at the most.
Okay, and were there any other cars in the driveway?
No, just mine.
Okay, and you said this all happened really fast, is that right?
Yeah.
Do you recall how long Riley and Jeff were in the garage together?
I wouldn't think more, not 10 minutes, not even that, I would think.
Okay, and does your garage door open all the way?
Yeah.
Okay, and it was open all the way at that time?
No, it was halfway open.
Okay, is it a single car garage or is it a multi-stall
Single.
garage? And where were Jeff?
But when Jeff came, he pushed it open the rest of the way.
Okay,
So it was all open. When I heard that noise, I turned to look.
okay,
And then
so the
that's when I
door
seen
opening is
Jeff.
what triggered you to look,
Yeah.
is that right?
Mhm.
And where were Jeff and Riley in the garage?
I couldn't see Riley at that time. I could see Jeff.
Okay, so Jeff, was his back to you?
No, I seen like the side of him, the front side of him, you know?
So Jeff was facing you?
No, he was looking at Riley.
Okay, so Riley's back was to you.
I couldn't see Riley.
Now you have me confused. Where was Jeff?
It's
In
like,
your
all
line of
right,
sight.
here is where my,
Thank you.
Is there chalk, Your Honor?
I'm sorry.
Looks like there
Is
is.
there some chalk on the
There's
board?
chalk on that.
Yes, that's a blackboard that goes back 50 years, and once in a great while, we actually use it, so feel free to show us.
okay. Here's my driveway. My car is parked here. Jeff's camper, his car was kind of parked here. And the light switch that Riley was going out to check to see if it was plugged in or not is on this wall. And evidently Jeff came, the garage doors like that or something, and Jeff pushed it up, and that sound is what startled me. And so I couldn't really see him until he walked out, Riley, a little bit, but I could see Jeff over here.
Okay. And just for the record, so you're looking at the side of the garage that you said that the light switch is on. That is the part that's attached to the house. Is that
Correct.
right?
Right.
So from your line of sight, you can't really see because that's a tough angle for you. Is that
I
right?
could not see the light switch, no.
Okay. And then your testimony is that Mr. Gibson comes from,
He comes from around and he opens the garage door and the sound startled me. He sees Riley in here, and from what I understood, he wanted to know what he was doing. And Riley said, I'm unplugging.
but
know,
you said that you couldn't hear anything that was said. Is
That's
that
what I'm
right?
saying. That
Okay.
part I did not. I
So
did
the
not hear
information that you
anything.
have wasn't from something that you personally observed that night?
Correct.
Okay, so it's almost like watching a video without sound, right?
Yes,
Okay. How long does this interaction in the garage,
not very long at all.
what do you mean by that?
Probably, I don't know, 5 minutes.
Okay.
If that maybe. you
And
know.
then how does it end?
It ends with, from what I remember, Jeff standing there, or he went back around, and Riley comes in the house, and that's when he said to me, he says, he just tried to cut my head
Well, and
off.
we don't want to get into that because that's not
Okay.
something, so they both walk away from each other.
Correct,
Okay,
from what I understand,
All right.
yes.
very good. If you want to have a seat, I appreciate that. That is helpful. I just want to ask you a couple questions about some things that you had testified to.
Okay,
Okay. You said that Mr. Gibson originally came on the property approximately 2023. Is that right?
yeah, I think somewhere in there,
Okay. And he had a camper that was behind the garage from the road. Is that
it
correct?
was at the end of my property, yes,
Okay. But he also had some items that were inside of this garage. Is that true?
yes, a lot.
And I think you even testified that there was so much of his stuff in there,
Yes.
you don't really know what was yours and what was his.
He moved everything around.
Okay,
And then my daughter was upset because she said she had some canned food and stuff, and that kept disappearing. And, oh God, yeah, there's
So
a,
people were getting frustrated because they had some other property in there that was getting moved around too.
right,
Is that
right.
All right. So Ms. Davis had asked you, who did you believe that this instrument that you testified that you saw, this
Yeah,
almost like a tree saw or something like that? You thought it was Jeff's, but you don't really know who it belonged to. Is that right?
I'm gonna assume that it was Jeff's because I have not been able to use my garage at all. And he's moved everything around that where I knew it was at.
How long have you lived there?
Over 50 years.
Okay, so you got a lot of stuff out there.
I didn't think I had that much, but.
Okay, fair enough. I don't have anything additional. Thank you, Your Honor.
I should interject here for a moment. I don't know if you guys have the PPOs. I didn't realize these were connected. Here's my recollection. People often try to use a PPO to evict somebody. You can't evict someone with a PPO. Mr. Gibson, my understanding, had been living there. He came in and just sort of took over. I don't believe he was paying any rent, and she wanted him to leave. So people will often try to use a PPO to just have the judge instantly remove someone from property. But you can't do that. That's not what a PPO is for. That's what an eviction is for. And an eviction, you have to give them a notice to quit, and yet it's cumbersome. It takes a while. But whether he was paying rent or not, he was a tenant at your property. So I denied the first PPO. You can't use a PPO to evict someone. Something else happened and there was another request for a PPO. So my recollection is that I barred him from assaultive or threatening behavior, but I didn't bar him from the property. That's where he lived. So I don't know if you read the PPO, but I don't believe the PPO prohibited him from coming back to the property. As I said, you can't use a PPO to evict somebody. And so I'm not sure where the eviction case is, but
I served
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 a
the
notice to
eviction
quit.
notice 2 days before I got the second PPO.
all right. I don't think the second PPO prohibited him from going to the property, is my recollection, but I don't have it in front of me. That would be helpful for all the parties to get a copy of it.
I kind of remember what was on the PPO.
All right, well, maybe we'll get to that, but I didn't know whether you knew it or didn't know it. I'm just giving you what my understanding was.
Yeah, and I understand from reading the police report that yes, that he was not prohibited from being on that.
Well, it'd probably be helpful for everyone to have a copy of both of those, so I'll have her get those. All right. You have
Just-
further questions?
Just a brief follow-up. So, Bobby, Attorney George kind of described it as you watching a movie without sound when you were looking out into the garage.
Mhm.
Could you tell the mood of the two, of Riley and Jeff, or can you describe their demeanor?
I naturally did not talk to Jeff, but because of the way the garage door went up like that and the being with him, but at other times, yes, he tends to threaten you a lot. And I don't know, Riley is, he's kind of cool in a way. I don't have that much, I mean, I don't spend much time with him.
When you say
So-
cool, do you mean like,
But when he
Calm or
came back
passive?
in the house, you know, to tell me this, he wasn't like, oh my God, he just tried to kill me. No, he wasn't that way at all. He just said, yeah, Jeff just said he was gonna cut my head off. I said, what?
and could you see Jeff's face during this altercation?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you couldn't tell what mood he was in or what his demeanor was?
No, I don't want, his moods are weird.
What do you mean by that?
He changes them very fast. Well, even, okay, he would come to the window a lot if I had the doors locked, because I didn't want him around. And he would come to the kitchen window and just, it would be nighttime, and he'd be knocking on the window and shining a flashlight. And even after all this happened, when the trooper here, he startled me the same way that Jeff did. You know, he was serving the subpoena on Riley, thinking that Riley lived there. And I was sitting there, it was, 9:30, 10 o'clock, and it's dark. And I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I hear this knocking on the window, and I went and looked, and I still do it today. Every time I see lights coming, I look at that window, thinking I'm gonna see somebody. Yeah, that part. I wished I could get over that.
When you are describing this demeanor, meaning like, was he joking? Was he angry? Was he agitated? Was he happy?
He was upset. When he would do this, it was because I had the doors locked and I didn't want to be bothered by him. And he maybe wanted his laundry brought in, and I got tired of that because it was hunting season and he would overload my washer. And I told him about that quite a few
I
times.
think we're getting.
Yeah,
past
none of this
the purpose
is
of what we're here
relevant.
for today.
I would agree.
So that's basically why I locked the doors a
Okay.
lot, because I didn't want him. in
All
there.
right, no further questions.
Thank you. Anything further?
I just have one.
All right.
You had indicated that the officer came to your house to serve a subpoena on Riley. Is that right?
No, yes,
Okay.
yes,
Did Riley live there?
no,
Okay. Had he ever lived there?
yeah, about a year or so before that, but my daughter had moved out and Riley moved with her. She had finally gotten a house.
Is Riley your daughter's son?
Yes,
Okay. I don't have anything additional. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becky. You may step down.
People call Riley Smith.
Good morning, sir. Or good afternoon. Would you please raise your right hand? Face me. You swear or affirm any testimony you're about to give in this matter will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief. Have a seat. Are you Riley Ashton Smith?
Yes, sir.
Could you spell your name for the record, please?
RYLEEASHTONSMITH.
Mr. Smith, I apologize. It's cold out. You've got 3 layers of clothes on, but it's about 80 degrees in here, so we'll do the best we can. Okay.
Riley, how do you know Roberta Becky?
My grandmother.
Okay, and how do you know Jeff Gibson?
My recollection, she let him stay there for a weekend. It was like the time of Thanksgiving. She said he could stay there for a week because he had nowhere to go or something, and then that turned into a year, or months in the year.
And so you knew him from staying over at your grandmother's property? Okay. The person that you are identifying as Jeff Gibson, is he in the courtroom today? Can you describe what he's wearing for the record, please?
She's wearing a green and
Green and
turquoise
green.
jump.
The order made the record reflect he's identified the defendant.
It may. My wife claims that I'm colorblind, but if you thought that was red, you're even more colorblind than I am.
I think I might be a little.
Okay. But at any rate, I'll acknowledge you identified the defendant.
Riley, did you have contact with Jeff Gibson on February 7th of 2025 at your grandma's?
Yes.
And tell me about that.
Well, my grandma called me because she said she just came from the courthouse. She come to get a PPO on him. And she come home and she was wondering why he was at her house when she just got a PPO. And so I think she called the police and asked them, and they came over, and then I came to the house. So I'm pretty sure the police were already there, and I asked him, you know, why is he here? And he explained to me that the PPO was partial PPO, that he had, you know, a set time date to be evicted because he lived there, or whatever you call it.
And so the first time that you went to grandma's that day, the police officer, the trooper was already there?
Yeah.
Okay, and you spoke with the trooper at that time. And you had the understanding that the PPO didn't prevent Jeff Gibson from being at the property. Is that accurate?
Not at that time. Yeah.
Okay. What happened after that?
I seen somebody in Jeff's car and I didn't recognize them, and I asked my grandma if she wanted them on the property, and she said no. So I asked the trooper to escort him off the property and, you know, to not have him come back. And then
Do you know who that person was?
no idea.
At some point, did the trooper leave?
I think Jeff left. Jeff and the person he was with left before the trooper. I think I was talking to him a little bit after Jeff left, and then the trooper left, and then Jeff came back.
Do you know how long it was between the trooper leaving and then Jeff coming back?
Probably about 4 or 5 minutes.
It's a very short period of time. And where were you when Jeff came back?
I was in the garage.
And what were you doing?
I was unplugging the extension cords
And why were you doing that?
because my grandma told me she'd unplugged them the night before and seen them plugged in again. So I figured she didn't want him using it.
Was the garage door, the overhead door open or closed?
It was halfway hung down because can't really hang it up all the way.
And how did you get into the garage?
Just left the garage door open because the side door is blocked.
Okay. And while you were in the garage, tell me what happened.
Well, I'm in there, I plug in the extension cords, and then a loud bang behind me. I turned around and it's Jeff. Well, actually, I'd seen him pull in again. I was in there and I seen him pull in, and then I think he went to the backyard to his camper or something, and then he must have come around into the garage and slammed the garage door open. So I turned around and he asked me if I wanted his food to go bad because I was unplugging the extension cords.
And can you describe like what his behavior, his demeanor was?
Well, he sounded kind of sick. He had like a scratchy voice, and you know, it was cordial at first, and then it kind of escalated where he was asking me or telling me that my grandma owed him money and that she should pay him money because he's helped her out so much. And I really just said, you know, she's an old woman. She shouldn't have to pay you money. You should do this out of the kindness of your heart. You know, that's what people do. And then I think he invited me into the backyard. He said, "There, come back to the backyard." To my
Like to have a
camera
cookout, or why did he invite you to the backyard?
to fight me, I think.
Okay,
And,
why'd you think that?
well, just his demeanor at that point. He kind of got all yippity and was like, you know, skipped a little to the left and was going to the backyard. He's like, come to the backyard in front of my camera or something like that. And told him that I didn't have to fight him. I was like, you'll be gone on March 7th.
And what did you mean by that?
I meant the eviction notice or the PPO where he had to be gone by March 7th, all his things. And
And what was his reaction when you said that?
he was not very happy. He said he got like a underbite. Kind of growled. He's like, touch my shit again. And
How close was he to you at this point?
about 3 feet. And then I think he raised his hand up. He raised his fist up in the air.
You remember the record reflect, he's raising his right
My
fist.
right hand. And then I grabbed him by the shirt with my left hand and raised my right hand. And then he kind of dropped his hand. And so I let go of his shirt and put my hand down. And then all of a sudden he reached up off the ground and grabbed a big knife.
What, can you describe this knife?
It's about yay long.
Just a minute, Mr. Gibson, you're certainly welcome to be here. We have to sit still and be quiet. All right, I don't need any editorial comment, just listen to the testimony. All right, well, we're not at that part yet. We're just hearing what he had to say.
Riley, Because this is being audio recorded, more so for the transcript, can you describe the
Well,
item?
15 inches long. The handle, I'd say about 8. The knife itself about 8, so maybe 16 inches long.
And what was the material that this item was made out
The
of?
handle looked, I didn't really inspect it afterwards, but the handle looked kind of wooden. And then the blade itself looked like it was a saw, serrated for cutting down small trees maybe.
And tell me what Jeff did with that item.
Well, he picked it up off the ground and he raised it in the air like he had his fist up, like he was raising his fist, but it was a little further back because his fist was right here. And then,
Did he say anything to you?
yeah, he said, "I'll cut your head off. I'll fucking kill you. You don't know who you're fucking with."
And was he still within 3 feet of you at that point? And what was your reaction or your feeling?
Kind of just froze up, had a bunch of thoughts, and
Did you think that he was going to do something?
well, I had the thought that he was gonna do something, and then you have a million thoughts at that moment, and I really didn't do anything. I just looked at him and, I walked away. Thank God.
And did he try to follow you?
No, he did not.
And where did you go after you walked away
I
from
went
him?
inside my grandma's house and told her to call the police back. And then she said to me, I'd already called them because I think he'd returned, or the person on the property returned, that the trooper just escorted off.
And so you went in to grandma. Grandma said, I already called the police. And then did the police come to the house again?
Yes, by the time I told her that, I looked out the window and he was pulling in. I went outside and he was there.
And so the trooper that you spoke to that day, is that Trooper Bowersox? And you gave a statement to him about what you had experienced?
I think I went into the garage and I grabbed the knife that he had. It was still there, and I told the officer, he just threatened my life with it, and tried to give it to him. And then Jeff came back around, and I was asking the officer if he could tell him to get back, and Jeff was not very compliant.
Tell me about that. Like, why did you ask the officer to have Jeff back up?
Well, because he just threatened my life with a knife, and I figured he'd come over and try to take it from me, or something.
This type of knife that you're describing, what type of injury did you think was going to be inflicted on
It
you?
would probably have been fatal,
Meaning,
one slash to the right place, you would bleed out.
and he had said that he would cut your head off?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have a friendly relationship with Jeff?
Tried to be cordial with him, but he was never he was always stealing my things, stealing my bikes and selling them for whatever reason, for getting rid of them, and stealing my BB gun, stealing my grandma's stuff. Just not very, it's hard to be friends with when he's the way he is, so.
Had you ever felt threatened like that before?
No,
Was this more threatening or less threatening than you felt before with Jeff in your arguments?
probably the most threatening.
You had described how Jeff was talking like with his kind of chin clenched underbite. Was he louder than normal or
Yeah.
quieter than normal?
Like I said, his voice was scratchy, so when he came up to me and asked me why I was unplugging and everything, if I wanted his food to go bad, I could hardly hear him. But then when he asked me to go into the backyard, I could hear him very clearly. He was being louder, almost yelling when he said he'd cut my head off, all that.
So it was kind of an escalating situation? Okay. No further questions?
Mr. Smith, this is Mr. Timothy George. He has some questions for you also. He represents Mr. Gibson, and you are still under oath.
Good afternoon. If you need me to repeat anything, just let me know, okay? You had lived on this property prior,
Yes, sir.
and so you had a relationship, good, bad, or indifferent, you had a relationship with Mr. Gibson.
Not really.
What's that?
Not really, sir.
Did you know each other?
I knew his name.
Okay, but you had just testified that you were alleging that he had stolen some items from you. Okay, so,
Stole some items from, yes, yeah. from my
okay,
grandma.
had you ever stolen any items from him? Okay, but you had encounters with each other before.
I never had a real conversation with him, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
So it's just about property being swapped
It was
back and
just,
forth between.
I
the two.
seen him on my grandma's property, living in the backyard. I said, who is that? She said, that's Jeff. He's gonna be, I let him stay for the weekend. I advised against it. Next thing you know, a year later, he's still living there. Our relationship's never been any more than me seeing him. Maybe, a quick something about a motorcycle, talking about a motorcycle. That's probably the only conversation we've had.
Fair enough. What time did you get to the house the first time that you got there on the 7th?
A little before dusk, I'd say,
Okay, so 5:36.
about 5 maybe, I think.
Okay, so it wasn't dark, but it was getting dark. Okay, and you had indicated that when you got there, the police were already there. And it was your testimony that Mr. Gibson and some friend were leaving.
They were just sitting in the car in the backyard. I wasn't sure if they were leaving.
Okay, did you have any interaction with them at that point?
No.
Okay, but then they ultimately do leave. Is that right? Then the trooper leaves?
Yes.
Okay, then at some point, you then go into the garage after a conversation with your grandma. Okay, at this point, is it dark?
No.
Okay, are there any lights that illuminate outside?
Not really.
Okay, did you turn a light on in the garage?
No.
Is there a light in the garage?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you in the garage before you heard Mr. Gibson come back?
About back is in to the property or is in the garage? Back to the garage.
Back, well, your testimony was that you originally heard the car come back, right? So you had seen him come in before
Seen him
he
pull
came
in.
into the garage. Is that right?
Yeah, I seen him pull in and then he went to the backyard for a couple minutes and then he came into the garage.
Okay, so at that point, when you were first in the garage and Mr.
About
Gibson
5
pulls
minutes.
in, how open is the garage door?
Halfway open.
Okay, so then Mr. Gibson comes in and your testimony is he opens it up.
Head height.
Head height?
He opens it up just enough to get his head through so he doesn't bend down.
Okay, how tall is, I mean, do you have an idea of how tall it is compared to him?
Yeah, about 5 feet, I'd say.
Okay, 5 feet taller than
So
he
like
is?
just a foot, he'd have to just barely lift it up. That's why I said he slammed it.
Okay, and that got your attention?
Yeah.
Testimony is that you guys get into some conversation about his items in the garage.
If you would like to say his items, but everything on that property, in my opinion, is my grandma's. But
Fair enough, but would you dispute that he had items in there?
I would,
Okay, so none of his property was in the garage?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know what was his. I only know what is my grandma's. Like the
Okay,
fridge I was unplugging, and
so you don't really have a deep basis for your opinion of who owns what in the garage?
right, because
Okay.
everything's kind of,
So you just went in after you talked to your grandma to unplug some cords?
Yeah.
All right, and then you guys have a conversation?
Yeah.
That starts to escalate, and you said you grabbed him by the shirt, is that
I
right?
said he raised his fist and I grabbed him by the short.
Okay, and then that stopped it at that point?
And then I raised my fist and then he dropped his fist. And then I-
Okay, and then you dropped yours, and then that's where you talk about he picks up this item from the ground, right?
Yes,
Okay, were you the same distance
same distance
the entire time?
the entire time.
How long did this entire interaction take place in the garage?
About 3 minutes.
Okay, and it probably seemed a lot quicker?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you initially get into the garage?
I opened the door.
Okay, were you able to, is there any type of side entry that goes into the house?
Yes, but it's blocked off.
Okay, so when this ends, you said you walked away. Is that right? Did you have to walk past Jeff to walk out of the garage and you had to turn your back to him?
Yes,
Okay. And then you indicated that between you and him, that was it. Nothing else happened in that garage.
Nope.
He didn't come after you, didn't chase after you into the house. Is that right?
that's right.
That was it. Okay. And you got a pretty good look at this saw, is that right? All right, because at some point, when the police arrive, you grab the saw and show it to the officer. Is that right? Okay. And it's your testimony that this was about a 15-inch blade?
Not blade, but altogether.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have any type of injuries? Okay. I don't have anything additional. Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Davis, any further?
No, I don't believe I have any further questions for this witness.
Mr. Smith, you may step down. Ms. Davis, anything further?
Yes, the people will call Trooper Hunter Bowersox.
Good afternoon. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you're about to give in this matter will be true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat and state your first and last name, spell it for the record.
Hunter Bauer Sox, or Hunter Wayne Bauer Sox, Hunter, middle name Wayne Bowersox.
Thank you.
Trooper Bowersox, you were employed with the Michigan State Police.
Yep.
And were you on duty as a Michigan State Police trooper on February 7th, 2025?
Yes,
And were you assigned to St. Joseph County?
yes,
Did you come in contact with a Roberta Betke on that date?
yes.
And where was that?
At a residence on Nottawa.
And what brought you to Roberta Betke's residence that day?
Initially was a phone call regarding a PPO violation.
And so when you arrived, what did you do?
When I arrived, first person I made contact with was Jeffrey, standing in the driveway. Prior to arriving there, I looked up in our lien to see if the PPO was in the system. If I remember correctly, it was. So I got out of the car, seen Jeff. First thing I asked, "Are you Jeffrey Gibson?" He says, "Yes." Said, "Do you know you have a PPO? Why are you here?" And he immediately tells me, he's like, "Well, my PPO says I'm allowed to be here." He goes and grabs his PPO information, hands it to me. I review it. Within the PPO information, it does say that Jeffrey has to be evicted from the house before it taking effect, because it's partial PPO. And yeah,
Was it just you and Mr. Gibson outside at this time?
yes,
And did you know Jeff Gibson before this date?
a while back, I've been sent to that address dealing with different civil dispute. So there's been one altercation where I have double Jeffrey.
And so the person that you believe to be Jeffrey Gibson, is he in the courtroom today?
Yes,
Can you describe what he's wearing?
green and orange flip flops.
Your Honor, may the record reflect he's identified the defendant?
It may.
Trooper Bowersox, after your initial encounter with Mr. Gibson, did you leave the Betke property?
No.
You stayed there the entire time?
Well, so I contacted Gibson. He showed me the paperwork of the PPO, which then I confirmed that it was partial PPO and he was allowed to be on the property. That's when I went, I knew obviously he wasn't the one that contacted law enforcement, so I went and knocked on the door. Spoke with Roberta, explained to her, showed her, she also showed me her PPO information on her side of things. Explained to her how it's partial PPO and that he hasn't, because she also showed me the eviction paper that she said that she had given to Jeffrey. I explained to her that he has until the 7th to get off the property, and then the PPO would be in full effect. After I spoke with her, I believe that she had a full understanding of it. She just told me that she at least wants Jeffrey out of the garage. I explained to her that obviously he's still a tenant of the property. I can't make him not go in the garage, but I can talk to him and ask him politely to stay out of the garage.
And so did you go out and talk to Jeffrey Gibson again?
Yep, I went out, talked to him, told him not to be in the garage, and told him like, hey, you have until March 7th. Like, told him that can't be arrested on this PPO. You have until March 7th to be off the property. If you're not off the property by March 7th, I will be here.
What was his reaction when you asked him to not be in the garage?
Just told me my property's in that garage too. I can be in that, like I can go in the garage. I just told him like, you can't go in the garage.
Was it friendly or aggressive or?
I wouldn't really say it was either. His actions are kind of frantic and erratic, kind of just jumping all over the place, can't stay still. So I wouldn't say it was friendly, but I also wouldn't say he was in a mean demeanor.
And did he agree to stay out of the garage then or no?
No, he didn't.
Okay. What happened next?
Started walking to my car, and that's when Riley arrived. So first time Riley arrived, he started asking me, of course, why I couldn't take Jeffrey for the violation of PPO. Quickly explained to Riley why I couldn't take Jeffrey for his PPO. And then Riley and Roberta requested, because there was a friend that was with Jeffrey, they requested that that friend be trespassed off the property.
Did you know who that person was?
I did have him identify himself. I can't the name off the top of my head.
And
So
did Jeff and that person leave or what happened?
So I went over, told Jeffrey's friend that he was trespassed from the property. Quick conversation with them. Went back and told Riley and Roberta that he had been trespassed. And they were starting to get their things to get off the property. I do believe that the friend had exited the property while I was there. I didn't know if Jeffrey had exited the property. I can't recall if he did. So I had left.
When you were talking to Riley, was Roberta out there with him?
Yes.
Okay. And can you describe the demeanor of the two of them?
Kind of irritated because they wanted Jeffrey off the property, and I couldn't do anything to get him off the property, obviously, because they believed that there was a violation of PPO and there wasn't. So I'd say kind of a irritated demeanor.
And how did you leave that situation then?
Just kind of explained to him that he had the right to be there, but as soon as March 7th hits, because that's when the eviction has taken effect, to just give us a call and we can come out there and get him off. And I believe that kind of put him at ease.
And did you leave the Betke property at that point?
Yes.
All right. And did you go back to the Betke property at some point that day?
Yes.
Do you know how long it was in between?
I'd say about 5 minutes. I probably got a block down the road, pulled over into a driveway and started typing into what we call our daily before I'd been re-dispatched out there.
And what was your redispatch based upon?
I believe that what it said was that Jeffrey and the subject that I trespassed were back on the property. And so I turned around and I went back there.
When you got back there, what did you see?
Jeff was standing in the side yard, and Riley was kind of by the front door outside the garage.
And did you speak with both of them?
So when I arrived on the property, I seen Jeffrey and his friend, obviously still there. I immediately told Jeffrey, Jeffrey and his friend, to get the subject off the property because he had just been trespassed. So Jeffrey and his friend had gotten in his car, pulled around the property, started pulling around the backyard to take Jeffrey's friend off the property. And that's when Riley said to me, I want to file a report for assault, stating that he had just held a knife up to me and threatened to kill me.
And can you describe Riley's demeanor at that point?
I would say still like irritated. I wouldn't say, it's the best way to describe it is irritated.
Did Jeff come back up to where you and Riley were speaking by the garage?
So, I told Jeff, to get his friend off the property, so he was in his car. As he's pulling around out back is when Riley, had stated me that, Jeff had threatened him with a knife. So then I immediately turned around, walked to the side yard to stop Jeffrey from, leaving the property. And kind of get Jeffrey out of the car. That's kind of like where I separate both parties, get a quick, knowledge of what's going on. Then separated Jeffrey over by his car. He's staying over by his car. I speak with Riley real quick. He gives me a brief summary of what happened. And that's when I go over and I detain Jeffrey to tell him my patrol car.
And when you detained him, was he cooperative?
In a way, it took me he was sitting in his car. It took me multiple times to get him to come out of the car. I believe in my body cam footage, at one point I told him, if you don't get out of the car, I will pull you out of the car. And then he eventually got out of the car, and putting him in handcuffs, he didn't really restrain at all.
After you detained Mr. Gibson, did you continue your investigation?
Yep, I detained Gibson, went and sat him in my car. And then I went and interviewed Riley, got their full story. And then I interviewed Roberta and got their full story.
And ultimately then, did you decide to place Mr. Gibson under arrest?
After speaking with Roberta and Riley, I went back to my car, sat down. That was when I was going to get a statement from Jeffrey. I began reading him his Miranda rights. And as soon as I began reading his Miranda rights, he just kind of began acting out of control to the point where I couldn't really speak to him. And that's when I just told him we're going to jail then. And
Where were you when this interview was happening?
parked in the driveway of Burris residence.
Were you in the car with Mr. Gibson?
Yep, I was sitting in the driver's seat,
And where was he?
passenger seat.
And can you describe to the court kind of how it's set up with state police and transporting?
Yep, so state police, we transport in the front. Jeff was handcuffed with his hands behind his back, seatbelt over him with our seatbelt lock on. Obviously me, driver's seat, there's a computer right here in the middle of us, and then Jeffrey in the passenger seat.
So after you read him his Miranda rights and you said he kind of started acting out of control, you made the decision that you were just going to transport him to the county sheriff's department?
Correct. So I probably got maybe a third of the way through reading Miranda rights, and he just started acting out.
What do you mean by that?
Just screaming, saying I didn't do anything, kind of having an anxiety attack, saying couldn't breathe, I didn't do anything, I had pneumonia, cussing, yelling at me. I kept on trying to go on with reading Miranda rights, but he was just yelling over me. So eventually I stopped and told him we're going to the jail.
What happened when you started driving to the jail?
I started driving to the jail. Jeffrey was being very frantic, kind of like trying to squirm and get out of the seatbelt. Kept on yelling at me to roll down the window, saying that he couldn't breathe. At first, I didn't roll down the window. He began bashing his head against my window. I cracked the window for him. He still kept on hitting his head against the window.
Did you tell him to stop doing those behaviors?
Multiple times, yep.
And did he stop?
No.
So was this creating like a safety issue, or what was your perception of this?
Correct, yeah. So I rolled down the window enough to where Jeffrey had then began trying to get his head outside the window. That's when I stopped my car, kind of pulled him back so I could get the window up. Then I drove to a safe spot, blocked down the road where there's a cemetery, pulled off to the side. He continued trying to bash his head against the window and kick into my dash. That's what I requested for a different unit with a cage in the back to come back and transport him.
And so after that, did a different officer then transport Mr. Gibson?
Yep, Officer was Sturgis PD came and transported him for me.
And so when you were giving Jeff these lawful commands to stop beating his head against the window or sticking his head out the window or kicking, were you fully uniformed?
Yes,
And were you in a fully marked patrol vehicle?
yes,
And it's your testimony that he did not comply with what you were asking him to do?
yes,
And it got to the point where you had to, for safety reasons, get a different officer to come transport him?
yes.
No further questions.
Mr. George.
Good afternoon. When did you initially get to the Becky residence?
I believe around 5:30.
PM?
Yep.
What was it like outside?
As in light wise?
Yeah.
It was light. It was obviously sun starting to go down, getting that about that time of day.
Fair enough. And who was all there when you originally got there?
When I originally got there, Roberta, Jeffrey, and his friend.
Okay, so Jeffrey and his friend are outside,
Yep,
and where's Roberta at that time?
she was inside.
Okay. You get into a discussion about the PPO, is that right?
Yep,
Did you ultimately go into the house at some point?
I did. Yeah,
Were you able to get into the kitchen area?
yeah,
All right. Did you see any windows in there?
Yep.
Were you able to look out that window?
yeah.
Do you remember anything about that?
I do know that it peers out into the driveway and see pretty much the whole side yard from the window.
Okay. Was there any obstruction within the window itself, or don't you recall?
Not that I can recall.
Were there a lot of items in the house?
Oh, yeah,
Okay, almost like you had to walk through paths to get through?
Yeah.
Okay. So you were ready to clear the scene. You did clear the scene,
Yeah.
right? After you had spoken to both parties, and then you leave, basically get a block down the road, come back. Is
Yeah.
that right? At what point did Riley get to the home? Do you remember?
I would say pretty much as I was leaving, as I had gotten done with talking to Roberta the first time, walking out the door, and that's when, or walked out the door, went and talked with Jeffrey, told him about she wishes that you would stay out of the garage, and around that time is when Riley had pulled into the residence.
Okay, and how was his demeanor?
Just kind of there to see what's going on, if I was gonna take Jeffrey for his PPO violation or not.
All right. And you were able to explain to him at that point
Yep.
that there wasn't a violation of PPO?
Yep.
Okay. You leave, come back a couple minutes later, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And from my from my understanding, of your testimony, you're about to clear the scene the second time, is that right? You had said that you talked to Jeff and his friend that were in the car in the
Yeah.
side yard. They had gone around the back of the house and then kind of came out the other side, is that right?
Yeah,
And then that's, at some point during that happening, Riley had said that this had happened. Is that right?
correct. I wouldn't say I was about to clear the scene that time. It was kind of like as I arrived, Jeffrey's in the side yard. Riley's kind of standing up by the door of the house. And my first words out of my mouth as soon as I seen Jeffrey and his friend is, I told you to get off the property. You need to get off the property now. So they immediately jumped in the car, and I hadn't really given Riley a chance to speak before when I first got there. My first initiation was to Jeffrey, and then I hadn't given Riley or Berta a chance to speak. So I
Fair
would
enough.
say I was clearing at that time.
Do you have an opportunity to take a look inside the garage?
I mean, I never went into the garage, but the garage door was halfway open, so I could peer inside the garage at the time.
Okay. Do you remember if there was a light on or anything in there?
I do not remember.
Okay. You can't tell, you can't say either way.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
recall.
Ultimately, you end up arresting Mr. Gibson, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And the testimony that you had discussed about him being upset, he was upset in the front seat of the vehicle, is that right?
Yep.
And he had complained to you about being sick.
Yep,
All right. And obviously, this was a pretty tense situation, is that right?
correct.
And it became clear to you that the Beckys didn't want him on the property anymore.
Yep,
That Roberta was upset when she couldn't get him off the property.
correct.
Is that right? So the information you were giving her at that time was not something that she wanted to hear.
Correct.
Then obviously Jeff was upset when you arrested him.
Correct.
All right. And I think you had said in your direct examination from Ms. Davis that I didn't do this.
Correct.
Right? I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Did you ever make an effort to find this knife or saw?
When I got there, I did have eyes on the saw. So what had happened, got there. Obviously I just told Jeffrey, because my first initial reaction when I come back the second time is I got out of the car, seen Jeffrey and his friend, told them to get out of here. And as they got in the car and I driving around, was when Riley came up to me and had explained that Jeffrey had just threatened him with a knife. So I go over and I stopped the car from Jeffrey from leaving the property, had him exit the vehicle. And as I was doing that is when Riley came around the corner with the knife in his hand, showing me this is the knife that he just had holding up to me. I told him to drop it, set it on the ground. And that's when I observed the knife.
All right, but other than that, then events took place and you never actually seized that knife?
We did seize the knife. The
Okay.
next day, we had a trooper go back to the residence to seize the knife.
All right, thank you. All right, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You can step down. Ms. Davis, anything further?
No further. Mr. President, Your Honor.
Mr. George,
Nothing for that.
thank you. Argument? Thank you. Go have a seat.
Your Honor, sometimes happens with preliminary examinations and testimony. You get more details than what you initially thought you were going to get. With this, it appears that this incident did happen in St. Joseph County in the state of Michigan, and that the individuals present were Riley Smith and Roberta Betke and Jeffrey Gibson. From the testimony presented, I would ask that the court infer the state of mind from the kind of weapon that was used, the acts and the words of the defendant, that he was threatening to kill Riley Smith. And based on the testimony of both Ms. Betke and Mr. Smith, he was close to him. He had the ability to do it. He was angry. I believe that the testimony of Mr. Smith shows that even when Trooper Bowersox was there, Mr. Smith asked to have Mr. Gibson step back because he was still concerned about what he might do. His behavior was erratic and jumping around. And as far as what he was doing at the time that he made this statement, it appeared to Mr. Smith that he could in fact kill him or fatally wound him in some manner. And he had the ability, present ability to do it. So with that, I would ask the court consider a bind over on assault with intent to murder. Obviously, it would be a question of fact for the jury to decide whether it would be a lesser included of either the assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder or a felonious assault. But I believe that the facts presented today, taking them at their face value, that he did say he was going to cut his head off, and obviously that is a fatal injury. But also ask the court to add a count of resisting and obstructing a police officer. I believe the testimony was that in St. Joseph County, about just a short ways down from Ms. Betke's property, when he was being transported, Mr. Gibson was not obeying the lawful commands of the officer to the point that it became a safety issue, and he had to have a different police agency come and put Mr. Gibson in the back of the car that had a cage to protect them. So I believe that that meets the burden of an act that was opposing or obstructing or endangering law enforcement, and I'd ask that he be found over on that charge as well. Thank you.
Mr. George,
Thank you, Your Honor. I think Ms. Davis is right. I think sometimes you do hear information at a preliminary examination that gives a little bit more light about what did or did not happen. And I think what did not happen is clearly an assault with intent to murder and an assault with intent to do great bodily harm less than murder. I think when the court looks at this, I understand that it's probable cause hearing, it's a preliminary examination, but I believe that both of those crimes are going to have some showing that the defendant tried to physically injure another person. So what we have here, and I know Your Honor sees these types of situations a lot, that there's a PPO, the Beckys want Jeff off the property. I think she was upset that the officer shows up and says, well, the PPO doesn't say that he can't be here. She calls her grandson over. There's some type of altercation in the garage, but I think in listening to Riley's version of it, which would be the best light to the prosecutor, they are kind of raising fists at each other, voices raised. I think at some point, both of them raise a hand, grab shirts. Then his testimony is that Mr. Gibson grabs this saw that we've heard about a little bit today, holds it up, and then it ends with Riley walking away past my client out of the garage and back into the house. So I think the court can infer there what his view of the situation was. He was so scared that he walked by my client, turned his back on him, and walked into the house. So I don't believe that the prosecutor, even by a probable cause standard, has met the necessary elements for the assault GBH. Clearly nothing north of that. And I would leave the court to its own discretion on whether there would be some type of resisting or obstructing based on the testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Davis?
Briefly, Your Honor, I don't believe that the testimony said that Riley turned his back to him or that he even necessarily walked past him. I guess I'm not clear how far into the garage Mr. Gibson was versus Riley, but they were within 3 feet of each other, close enough that when Jeff raised his fist at Riley, Riley was able to reach out and grab onto his shirt and raise his own fist in defense. And then when Jeff dropped his fist and Riley dropped his fist, he took him by surprise by grabbing a weapon, a dangerous weapon that could be used to seriously injure or kill Riley. So, everybody responds differently to trauma, right? And we weren't there, but when you look at the incident and what Mr. Gibson said and his behavior and his demeanor, the fact that he had just been told to not bring his buddy onto this property, and within 4 minutes, 5 minutes of the police officer leaving, he's back at the property with his friend. He doesn't respect the lawful orders of the court, and it's shown by his behavior and his continued behavior. So I'd ask the court to consider binding as I requested. And I do want to address the protective conditions for the victim.
When I first looked at this, I thought it's either felonious assault or assault with intent to commit murder. Great bodily harm somewhere in the middle. There's a range of assault, starts from simple assault. Felonious assault is assault with a weapon. Assault with intent to commit great bodily harm is a next level up. It's punishable by up to 10 years imprisonment. And the next level up is assault with intent to commit murder. He didn't say, I'm going to cut you. He said, I'm going to kill you. There was a lot of misunderstanding here. And people watching this may get a skewed view of things. The unfortunate truth on this is Mr. Gibson was a tenant. He was a lawful tenant at Miss Betke's. He was a tenant by sufferance. She had allowed him to stay there for more than a year. He was a tenant. At that point, he wasn't a trespasser. He wasn't an interloper. And probably he had the right to invite people to visit him at his tenancy. He also didn't have the right to unplug his refrigerator where his food was kept. That violates the landlord-tenant lockout law. And the poor troopers trying to enforce this order. And what Mr. Gibson had received is called a notice to quit, a 30-day notice to quit, meaning you have 30 days to vacate the property, or it starts the landlord-tenant eviction process. If he hadn't moved by March 7th, the troopers wouldn't have been able to remove him. Obviously, he was a giant pain in the neck. He moved in there. He didn't pay any rent. He's living on this trailer. He's taken over her house or her garage. He's pounding on her windows. He's using her washer and dryer, but he's a tenant. And you cannot use a PPO to evict someone. There is not a magic procedure where you go to the court and say, I want this person off my property. And the judge just says, okay, you have zero notice and you're placed off the property. There's a process for that. The Mrs. Betke had asked for a personal protection order, and this is in file 25028, and that was January 13th. January 10th, that was reviewed by another judge, and they denied it. She petitioned again. Some other things had happened between January and when I saw it on February 6th. I still declined to evict him from the property with the PPO, but I ordered that he not have any contact with Roberta Betke, not approach her or confront her, not contact her by telephone, not threaten to physically kill her, not purchase a firearm, not post any message by email. Basically, he was ordered to stay away from and not talk to Roberta Betke, but it had just been served earlier that day. He then was served a notice to quit. It's a wonder it took as long as he did. You might write up there as the world's worst tenant. You're junking up her property. You don't pay any rent. Anyway, she wants you to go. Your perception is you're a big help to her. Her perception is she wants you out of there. So it all, through one set of perhaps unclear understandings to another, it turned into this, based on this ill-advised tenancy. The resisting and obstructing charge is pretty straightforward. I find there is probable cause to believe that the defendant resisted or obstructed the police officer in the car. He was full of anxiety, but he was very uncooperative, bashing his head on the window, kicking the dash. Back in the old days, they never transported anybody in the front seat, but that's the way it works in a lot of cars now. So much stuff in the cars, you can't fit anybody in it. Anyway, so dangerous for the officer and dangerous for the passenger. So the question becomes, what level of assault is this? The matter is charged over the weekend by Chief Assistant Prosecuting Joshua Robert. He originally charges it as felonious assault, so with a weapon. Ms. Davis reviews it later on January 11th and reauthorizes it as assault with intent to commit great bodily harm. We took the testimony today, and she's asked me to bind over on the charge of assault with intent to commit murder. So let's compare the two. Let's start with felonious assault, which is assault with a weapon. The defendant is charged with the crime of assault with a dangerous weapon, also known as felonious assault. To prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each element beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant either attempted to commit a battery upon Riley Smith or did an act that would cause a reasonable person to fear or apprehend an immediate battery. A battery is a forceful, violent touching of the person or something closely related with that person. I think the prosecutors met the standard on all of those, at least a probable cause. Second, that the defendant intended to either injure or make the complainant reasonably fear an immediate battery. I think that element has been met. Third, at the time the defendant had the ability to commit the battery, appeared to have the ability or thought he had the ability. They've met that. They were very close together. He was angry, and it would appear the defendant would have had the ability to commit that battery. Fourth, the defendant committed the assault with a dangerous weapon. And we now know this is some sort of a saw or knife with a serrated edge. So I believe there's probable cause on each of the elements of assault with a dangerous weapon. However, assault with intent to murder has got additional conditions. The jury instruction, which is found at MJI 17.3 on assault with intent to commit murder, says the defendant is charged with a crime of assault with intent to commit murder. To prove this charge, the prosecutor must prove each of the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant tried to physically injure another person. Not clear. Second, that when the defendant committed the assault, he had the ability to cause an injury, or at least believe he had the ability. He would have had the ability to cause an injury. Here's the problem. Third, the defendant intended to kill the person he assaulted, and the circumstance did not legally excuse or reduce the crime. I do not believe there's probable cause to believe that Mr. Gibson intended to kill Mr. Smith. Or under the lesser standard, to commit great bodily harm. He intended to threaten him with a knife or a saw, which is felonious assault. I don't believe there's probable cause to believe the defendant intended to kill Mr. Smith, despite what he said. He didn't do anything. He didn't swing it at him. He just held it up and said, you know, I'll fucking cut your head off, or I'll fucking kill you, or something to that extent. But he didn't do anything beyond that. So those are words without any further action. So I believe there's probable cause to bind the defendant over on the original charge of assault with a dangerous weapon as a fourth habitual offender, and add a second count of resisting and obstructing a police officer. Now, Mr. Gibson, I've always spelled your name Jeffrey. That's how it's spelled in the PPOs. Is it spelled Jeffrey?
Yes.
All right, well, the prosecutor spelled it right and the PPOs spelled it wrong. So your charge in the formal complaint is Jeffrey, Alan Gibson. Bond in this matter is set in the amount of $15,000 cash or surety. Ms. Davis, you wish to speak to that?
Yes, Your Honor. Based upon a few factors, I believe that the bond should be increased. One being that the incident happened immediately after he was released from jail from being incarcerated for his previous behaviors. And the fact that he has tried to contact Ms. Betke multiple times, I want to say 30 plus times from the jail. There will be a new complaint investigated regarding aggravated stalking. He is a danger to himself. He's a danger to Ms. Betke. He's a danger to Mr. Smith. He's a danger to the public. And I don't believe that $15,000 is the right amount. I know it's impossible to pick the right amount, but you know, he's negotiating with the quick bail bonds to get out for $750. That's not very much to put up when you've made these threats. And I certainly respect the court's decision on that. It was a difficult one to decide in charging. And what was the level? I don't know. I don't know what Jeff is capable of, but he scares me of what he could be capable of, depending on what substances he's using. So I would ask that the court consider increasing the bond. If they're going to leave it at what it is, I would ask that he be required to be on GPS tether if he is released, and that he be required to submit to alcohol and drug testing upon the demand of any police officer or the court. Thank you.
Mr. George, your response?
Yes, Your Honor. I think that, from Jeff's perspective, he wants to get his things off of this property. I think it's pretty clear that the Beckys don't want him there. He doesn't want to be there. And I think his biggest concern is since February 7th, he's been at the jail worrying about what's going to happen with all of his items. He's been there for a couple of years. I think Ms. Becky's testimony was even that he's got a bunch of stuff in that garage. So I know that that's his biggest concern at this point. He doesn't want to live there anymore. He just wants to be out of there so he can just have this chapter of his life behind him. So obviously at this point, he hasn't been able to make his bond. We'd ask the court to consider a 10% provision of any type of bond that it sets in this matter. If the court would feel more comfortable that Mr. Gibson have a GPS tether on, I'm sure that he would do it. I think it's just his intention at this point to get his items off of that property, move back in with his parents, and just move on with his life and deal with this case and his other matters as he goes. Thank you.
Are those calls recorded? The clerk came and saw me just before we started, so the numerous calls from Mr. Gibson to the jail or from the jail to talk to Ms. Betke are recorded somehow?
Yeah, so the system that the jail uses records the day, the time, the number that was being called, whether or not somebody answered or not, whether a voicemail picked up. So there were calls that were made repeatedly to the home phone number of Roberta Betke, which is the number that is on the PPO that Mr. Gibson has the copies of because he was served. And the other phone calls that he's been making, I mean, those are just phone calls to his family and friends, that sort of thing, which is fine. But he would call repeatedly multiple times in a row during the day. And maybe we can take testimony from Ms. Betke about how it has affected her. He has stopped doing that in the last week or so. It's my understanding that he was warned by the corrections personnel that this had been brought to their attention. So he has stopped doing that thus far. But when there's not the separation with a jail cell, I have concerns that he's going to not be able to stay away. I think there's going to be a lot of property issues with them. I don't know how they can identify whose stuff is who's in the garage and the buildings. But I can we can make sure that the Betkes do not remove any of his items or dispose of them if that's the concern. I think that they'd probably would rather have the safety and security of having him behind bars instead of getting rid of his stuff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The bond conditions in the instant case prohibit him from having any contact with Riley Smith. And there's no indication he attempted to have contact with Riley Smith.
Correct.
All right, well, let me go further. The personal protection order that I signed that was served on the defendant says he is prohibited from stalking Roberta A. Betke, approaching or confronting her in a public place or on private property, prohibited from contacting her by telephone, posting a message through a medium of communication, internet, computer, or other electronic medium. So he's going to do what he's going to do. Now, this is a mess because he is a lawful tenant at that property. And Ms. Betke, you need to follow through with the eviction in this case. He has rights in an eviction. He's not automatically evicted after March 7th. If he can get his property off of there and out of there by March 7th, then you don't need to pursue the eviction, termination of tenancy. He doesn't have a lease. He's not paying any rent, but he is a lawful tenant. So then it's set for a hearing regarding termination of tenancy. And there's a first hearing, and then he has a right to have 7 days for a second hearing. And if you prevail, he has another 10 days to vacate. So the soonest this would happen would probably be the end of April. Rather further complicated by the fact that he is in custody. I'm canceling his bond. You're going to have to deal with this in 90 days. It isn't a matter of money. It's a matter of protection. He's going to do what he's going to do. There's a personal protection order that says he's not to have any contact with her. There is a public safety issue. If he is released, he can file a motion to establish a bond in the circuit court, but the matter is bound over. I'd ask you to file an amended information alleging felonious assault, second count of resisting and obstructing a police officer, Officer Bowersox, and the bond is denied.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes?
Can we have access to the documentation that the court and Ms. Davis has been talking about these?
About the
This is the
phone call?
first time I've heard about anything like this, so
And it just came up within the
fair
last
enough.
24
I
hours, so
just
can
want to
get
have
you
access to
copies.
that information as well so that we can. figure out
Certainly,
what's going on.
certainly. And then you can bring a bond issue in circuit court.
Thank you, Your Honor.
But I have a concern about public safety.
I didn't talk to anybody, sir.
What's that?
I didn't talk to anybody in jail.
All right, well, we'll keep doing that. All right, we're good to go.
Thank you, Your Honor.